It's a brand new year. We have a new attitude. We have a new perspective. We have a new outlook, a new lease on life, and hopefully a renewed call for some new action to solve some very old, long-standing, entrenched problems. It's been a long time coming. Tony Kelly and I have been trying to work this out. But this is the start of a new year. I couldn't launch on my birthday, so we are doing it in my pearls to celebrate our First Lady. We have determined that this is a year we will stop casting our pearl before swine. We are dropping real truth to empower real people to make a real difference in our community for our very real children who are dying on the vine, who are being thwarted at every turn. I am saluting those mothers who have been out there these past couple weeks occupying the Board of Education and the Superintendent's office on behalf of children. I am out celebrating the life of my baby brother, Dale Anthony. Tony Kelly has made us all remember to sound the trumpet in our own way. This is our battle cry. We are going to, this year, every week, bring you at least 15 minutes of a new perspective on an old problem with the idea that we will solve this once and for all. As Fannie Lou Hamer said, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're figuring out a way to bring information to people that will empower you to make a difference. We don't want any more screaming, shouting, and even marching. We don't want to fill up any more meetings where people can turn a blind ear, a deaf ear and a blind eye to the death and destruction that is happening in our community. We don't want any pictures of bikes tied to trees with patches of grass held out as promise. We want real hope. We want real solutions. We want real struggle to solve real problems. And we're going to start, we've done a lot of research. We still want to restore our tax base. That has not changed. In fact, since we last talked, there are at least 2 more apartment buildings. One of them is on my corner. Hofstra sold the apartment complex to Conifer Living, I believe. And it seems like they're still charging market rate rents. They're calling it affordable work housing. And it's my understanding that they are seeking a tax abatement. We need to put a stop to this once and for all. I have been in touch with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We have done some research with HUD. I've spoken with the Nassau County Comptroller, Assistant Comptroller briefly. I'm working on a letter for Tom DiNapoli, the State Comptroller. This is against the law. And if they are allowed to take another property off of our tax roll without our school board and our mayor and trustees bringing a lawsuit against the town and county for this practice, we need to occupy their homes with our tax bills and make them pay it. There was a halt to the county executive's attempt to stop guaranteeing the tax certiorari's, which would have been devastating for us. There's a meeting tonight where they're trying to, I guess, distribute Uniondale's tax base to others. So I want to get to that meeting because I want to hear how they approach that so we can figure out how we can use those same arguments to get our tax base back. It's interesting that they will have meetings about that where they're going to take property rights away from a now predominantly minority community to share that wealth, but they have no problem continuing to erode our tax base. I said that there was a lot of research, and this is my stack of papers. These are all the reports I've printed out that's been done on the problems we have in Hempstead. It's amazing. You may have heard, and we're going to just do some cursory things and then come back over the next few weeks and do more detail. The big one was the big Long Island study that went to Albany. and it was a big competition, and it was the Long Island Regional Vision Plan in Hempstead and Wyandanch. This is that report. And they actually got funded. They didn't get anything close to what they wanted, but the two projects that did get the largest funding was, guess where? Hempstead and Wyandanch. And what does that tell you? That tells you that communities like ours, yet again, are driving the funding sources. We just never get the benefit. What's interesting about this, and this is the Long Island's Future Economy, a new beginning for Nassau and Suffolk County, a strategic economic development plan for the Long Island region. It was a joint venture. The president of HOSTRA and the president of the Long Island Association co-chaired. It was appointed by Governor Cuomo, and they put together this project. And it's very interesting because they're talking about what kind of industry they're going to develop over the next 15, 20 years to replace Grumman and Fairchild in the military-industrial complex that no longer exists here. And it's going to be this biomedical technology kind of thing, you know, Hofstra with their new med school, and they're going to do all this wonderful stuff, you know, all this lab development and all this pharmaceutical company and research and all kinds of things. And guess what they're going to build in our community? The places where we get mentioned. They want to build more multifamily homes and, you know, streets or something. It was like we weren't included at all. Nothing about our schools, nothing about what we're going to do to make sure that our kids can participate with the lab development or get into the med school at Hofstra. We were left out of that completely. What we got in the plan was the Renaissance downtown redevelopment. They're going to build 3,500 more units of housing in Hempstead. Can you imagine? Now, what's interesting about that, and we're going to, you know, increase our technology. No, see, Tony, I lost it on the... Okay. But what we're going to do, what I did do, is I did the basic census demographic information, and that's what we're going to kind of focus on. Because in this report, it was very interesting, and this is what happens once you start doing the research, right? In this report, they talk about, because they're trying to get the rest of Long Island to agree to build more multifamily housing, right? More multifamily units. And so they mentioned in this report that 2/3 of the multifamily housing, you know, big apartment buildings that exist on Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk, 2/3 of those apartments are tax positive. And I said, really? And it was a big report that was done by the Long Island economist, Pearl Kramer. You've heard of her. And so I had to find, of course, the report they cited, which is Multifamily Housing on Long Island, its impact on numbers of school-age children and school district finances. And in this report, they identify that multifamily housing, large apartment buildings, are really tax-positive investments for communities. So, you know, I found that very interesting, and anybody that's been listening to me for the past 2 to 3 years, no, we thought that was because none of the apartment buildings for us are tax positive. So I had to find this study. And lo and behold, they do enumerate. And in every community except guess where? Hempstead and Freeport, they are tax positive. And I mean tax positive to the tune of millions of dollars. The difference is that in those communities, most of their multifamily housing are condos and co-ops with very few children. Wow. And guess what we have? We have multifamily rentals with tax abatements. So is there any wonder why theirs are tax positive and ours are tax negative to the extent of millions? Now, one of the things, those of you who did attend that IDA meeting at Nassau County when they did the MoVon project, one of the things that the commissioner said that I found very telling, and it's just something that gets my gall. It just still, I can hear him in the back. And what they say is the reason that this happens to us is because we have all the apartment buildings. We have all the apartment buildings. Now what's interesting is as you do this research, you find out that everything that they say that they want in big studies like this one, right? This is the economic future for Long Island. Everything they say they want these attractive new Long Island, Strong Island communities to have, we already have. We have the multi-family dwellings. We have more multi-family dwellings than anyone, right? The village of Hempstead has 55% of its housing is 1 or 2 family. For the town and county, 87% of their housing is 1 or 2 family. For the village of Hempstead, 44.6% of our housing is multifamily, meaning 3 or more, mostly large apartment buildings. 12% of the town and county is multifamily dwelling. 43% of the village housing is owner occupied, which is up from the 80s and the 90s. It's up because in the 80s, when I was on the school board in the 80s and the 90s, less than a third of our housing was owner occupied. So we are up to 43%. But for the town and county, 80% of their housing is owner occupied. 19% of the town and county's property is rented, and 56% of our apartments are rented. Now what's interesting about that is these county and town properties that are multifamily are still owner occupied. So they are reaping a tax benefit. What happens to us, because ours are rented, the landlord is reaping the benefit and we are paying the taxes. And that's what they need to figure out how to correct. Not tell us that in spite of the fact that we already have, that we are paying the taxes as homeowners and small businesses for those properties so that those landlords can make money. And that's not happening anywhere else. Now that wasn't quite my real thought, but let's go with that. What that means is they are trying to get the rest of the county to build more multifamily housing. That's the goal. They're saying that the communities of the future must have more housing. Now the 2 plans that got funded in the Long Island Regional Economic Development Plan was a plan to increase housing in Hempstead. They want to build 3,500 units, 3,500 more units of multifamily housing here. We already have more multifamily housing than anyone else. And they're not clear that it's going to be owner occupied. The properties that they are currently building, for example, the totally new development, they redeveloped that property at the corner of Manor Avenue and Fulton. Completely redeveloped, increased the number of housing units there, and now they want to take it off the tax roll. So what is the benefit and how are they getting away from it? Getting away with it. Now, the other thing I found out as we started looking at the information, and people crack me up when it comes to us because they want to give our village away. So I looked at the racial diversity issues, right? In the village of Hempstead, we are the most racially diverse community. We have 40% of our village. Let me see, where are my numbers? All right, so let me just tie this up real quick. What I'm trying to point out is that in doing all the research, and we're going to go into more detail with this stuff, but the thing that I found that was the most interesting is that we are in such a policy blind spot. There is such a gap in terms of there being any systemic research or study being done about what is happening in these historic communities of color in Long Island. 15 years ago, there was a tremendous research gap with suburban issues. There was just, they called it a policy blind spot. And as they've begun to fill that blind spot, our issues are being submerged by these other issues where you can promote our exploitation by simply saying 2/3 of the housing is tax positive and therefore this is a viable goal, and use that to build more subsidized housing in our communities where the 1/3 of the tax negative properties are all concentrated. We cannot afford to allow these policy practices to continue. And I believe if we are able to get the kind of detailed focus, systemic study of these issues, into the policy arena, what we're going to find is that these are structures that were put in place when we had an unconstitutional form of government that continues to perpetuate those same kinds of discriminatory, unconstitutional practices, even though the county structures and the town structures have changed. Hempstead and Freeport are the most culturally and racially diverse communities. In spite of what you say, the census data for the village of Hempstead says that 53% of our population is African American, 32% is Hispanic, and 28% is white. Unlike the town and county, where 80% of the population is white, in the town, a little over 10% of the population is African American, say about 12%, and about 10% is Hispanic. And in the county, it's equal between African Americans and white, 10 and 10%. Now, and then there's some others mixed in. But when you look at how we celebrate cultural diversity, and we look at the influx of people, we walk through our community, and we don't see this diversity because we are locked into little pockets within neighborhoods. But the racial diversity that is the goal for the rest of the region, we already have it. The diverse housing population or housing stock, we already have it. The increased number of renters, we already have it. The transportation hub and intermodal transportation hub, meaning we have a bus terminal, we have a train station, we have taxi service, we have all of the things that everybody else is trying to get in their community. Hempstead already has it. Even the number of people in the workforce, and I thought this was very, very telling. We have the same number. This is the only area where there was some parity in terms of the number of people in the labor force. Right? That is, I thought, was very interesting. The town has 63% of their residents over 16 are in the labor force. The county, 63% of the residents 16 years and over are in the labor force. And in the village of Hempstead, 61% of the residents over 16 are in the labor force. Yet, the village of Hempstead has 17.7% of its people living below poverty versus the town, who has 5.8% of their population living in poverty, and the county with 5.2%. How do we have almost equal numbers of people in the labor force and this kind of disparity in the number of people living below poverty? It's the same with income. The median income for the village, the town, and the county is grossly disparate. Our median income in the village of Hempstead is slightly over $40,000. The median income for the county is just above $78,000. And the median income for the town is just below $70,000. Per capita income, the village of Hempstead is 14%. The town is just below 30%, and the county is 34%. How do we have the same number of people in the workforce, and yet we have these gross disparities in income and in wealth? A major reason for that is because we are paying the taxes of multi-million-dollar landlords. And I think the other thing I have to make very clear, if the town and county have determined that this is in the region's best interest to have these housing complexes centrally located the way they are, and to give these landlords these tax abatements that benefit the county and the town, our cry needs to be that let the county and the town pay the taxes. If they don't want to make the landlords pay the taxes, okay, but the town and the county should pay the taxes. I don't really care, I mean, which is still us paying the taxes, but it's spread out over larger portions of the population. We will get into these economic and economic disparities, this wealth distribution disparity, the racial and cultural diversity issues, and most of all, the failing schools. Failing schools follow poverty. Where you have poverty, you have failing schools. And so the fact that poverty is contrived to be centrally concentrated in the ways that it is in our county means that we are cutting our own switch in that regard. We are making or controlling situations that make it seem as if you were clearly targeting certain groups of people to unfairly bear the cost financially, to unfairly bear the cost of the prison system, to unfairly carry the cost of generating income for others. I know some of this was rambling. I have too much information to try to fit it all into one thing. I hope that I've gotten your interest enough that you will tune in next week, and I'll see you then. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Get ready for the revolution. What you say? You can't handle the truth.